I'm going to quickly crack through. I'm James. I know at this point you can all see and hear and everything else, so that one's done. What we'll cover, basically quickly, how to make Dynamics 365 Business Central warehousing as quick and efficient, paperless. So everything is done electronically, real time, on the move. I'm just, before I proceed, I haven't got any slides. I'm just going to crack straight in on this one. So that's one of the devices. That's designed to be worn on your wrist. Okay, so you put it on, tighten it up, if you can see that. And then there's the kind of fingerprint scanner that you put on your fingers. So the idea behind that type of device is that you can actually move boxes while wearing the device, and it's there for you to tap with and look at. So that's one. The other one is the more traditional one with a little keypad at the bottom for numerics, or you can get them alphanumerics, but they're extremely small. A big touch screen these days, and then a scanner on the top. I'm sure you've all seen those while you're doing the shopping, if no other format. So some of the software we're going to be doing is actually going to be running on those. Some of the software, obviously, we'll look at Business Central as well. So let me stop sharing camera and start sharing screen. And I'll come out of... So first thing I wanted to look at was just go and look at the structure. So within Business Central, we have locations, first of all. Locations are geographic sites. This is where you store inventory. So anywhere, the rule about having multiple locations, we sometimes have what we call virtual locations. So within a geographic site, you know, Birmingham, you might have a separate warehouse if you just want to segment some stuff off. But by and large, it is, if you need to put it on a truck to get it somewhere else, you would have a separate location. So lots of information about the way locations are processed. So do we require warehouse receipts, shipments, putaways, that sort of thing is set up. A lot of that is set up per location. And one of the things you'll hear me say is directed pick, put away and pick. This is really where the system starts telling you where to put stuff rather than you saying where you've put it. So we have kind of a relaxed situation where you just have a series of bins within the location and you go, right, I put that item into A1, or you can have a situation where it says you've got to put it into D4. D4 is the directed, and it will look for kind of, you know, the first available bin that's empty, that's appropriate for this particular product. So once we get into the location, we've got zones when you're directed, and you can see on the screen the type of zones you have. So you can have particular types of zones, special equipment, special handling as well, kind of situation. So for instance, you might have a chilled zone if you're in food, or you might have a frozen zone, or you might, another one I've come across is where you have a chemical zone where you have to have stuff which is stored in a particular type of way. So you'll set that up, and then within the zone, you'll put a number of bins. So if I go back to the location card, we'll see the bin list, big long bin list, no particular kind of format for the way that the bins will need to be structured, but can have some significance in terms of the rate at which you walk around. We can have on a location, on an item, sorry, then if we go, let's just go look at items. I'm going to rattle through this quite quickly because, as Liam said, 30 minutes, not a vast amount of time, if I'm honest. But they squeeze me in at the end of the day. So if I go and look at on the item list, I'll go under navigation and I'll look at bin contents. And this shows me this item. I've got 3 bins here. I've got an adjustment bin, which I'm not using, but I've got 2 other bins. So one is a fixed default bin that's not dedicated. Dedicated means I cannot put another item in that bin. I can only have 1906-S, so I haven't ticked that. Fixed means that it always stays in the bin content list even when it's empty, so it's run. And the default really is it's the default bin. It's the bin it will go to first, typically described as the pick bin in our parlance. So here I've got a fixed default pick bin, and I've also got what we would term a floating bin. So W0410 is almost my bulk area. It's up in the racking, it's out of the way. So I've got 5,000 in my bulk, and I've actually got 5,000 in my pick face as well, ready for me to do. So I can see where my stock is at any one time and set up where I come into here to set up, for instance, where my pick face is. So it's important to define kind of fixed default if you want to run that kind of methodology against each item. So having set that up, you know, if I go in and just rattle through again some of the options. So, sorry, wrong one. Just time that. Show warehouse receipts. So I can define a warehouse receipt for the white location, and I can then go and pull different purchase orders onto this warehouse receipt. So can do it that way, or the much easier way is actually to do it by, I believe, is do it via the device. So let's go look at the device. My remote control session has timed out, so let me just reconnect that. While it's doing that, I'll just go to this. Look, quickly create a new one. I'll tell you what, I'll actually go and copy document and include header and just release that. Come on, connect. The screen of my mobile device. So let's just, there we go, that's better. Right. So if I just go out of here, go into receipt. Okay, it comes up number. That's deliberately the way this is set up, is that in effect the input is always the top. So it's asking me the number. Why isn't it asking me transfer? But I'll type in 106037. And the next thing, it's asking me if I want to give it a rating, so I can enter some quality information. So I'll say the truck was moderately clean and the driver was courteous, and I got a third one on there. So okay, I've asked for 3 bits of information. Too many on here. And finally, it's asking me an item number. So I'm now just going to scan a barcode, and it's going to say, and how many are doing? It shows me there's 5,000 pieces outstanding receipt. I'm just going to receive 100. So I'll enter 100 and go post. Okay, it's now asking me to receipt the next item. If I come back to here and F5, you'll see that line has been receipted. So it's immediately up to date. So this is what's saying. You're sitting in the office and you can keep close control on every pallet potentially that they take off. At that point, we can, I can't show you this, but we can have triggered a label print so we can put a label on it. If we want to track it, so we have what we call container tracking, so we can see that, so we know what pallet that is and where we put it and so on. So track that round. Let me now go to put away. So warehouse put away in this instant, and it's created that. So there's the 100 that we've received. This time I'm going to process it via the screen. I'm just going to register it. If you were doing this within Business Central, there's a situation of where you're doing. What we've done is we've done the receipt, we've put it in the goods in bay, and we then now taking this and putting it away into the racking. So posting that put away sheet. Now, I can do that as one operation, so I can receipt and put away. If you typically, you know, that's quite often, if you put it on a fork truck, you lift it off the back of the wagon, you receipt it, and you say, I put it in D4 to use my earlier example. So that gets us the whole kind of scenario of how we get stuff very quickly booked into stock and put away in a specific bin location in the warehouse. I'm halfway through my time. So my next is just to pull up. I'm going to go and quickly look at a movement worksheet. The typical next thing we get asked is, how do we replenish the pick face? How do we move things down from our bulk areas into our ground level pick face? So this is called a movement worksheet. So for each bin, for each pick bin, you can set a minimum quantity that you want to hold into that pick bin. And then in the movement worksheet, we've got a calculate bin replenishment. And what that'll do is that'll go through each of the fixed bins, look at what the quantity that's in there, look at the minimum quantity, and if it's below that, it'll generate a replenishment from the appropriate place in bulk. If you're doing things like lot traceability or you're doing containers, it can actually take the oldest stock from the bulk location. If you're not, then it'll pick based on what's called bin ranking. So it'll try and empty certain bins first. So that's why containers can become really useful. I doubt I've got anything to replenish here, so it's not coming. That creates a movement. If you save that movement, you can then pick up the device. And if I go back to the device, just quickly, my mouse on the right screen. If we reverse out of there and go back, you will see on internal, we've got two types of movement, a movement and a directed movement. Difference between those is the movement is just, I've taken this quantity of this item out of this bin and put it over here. Directed movement is, I want you to do this. So you're telling them what to replenish. Replenishments create directed movements. So that's got the stuff receipted into bulk across into my pick face. So how do I then organise to get it out and picked and shipped to customers when they order it, right? So the first thing is to understand how it's going to go. And typically Business Central by default, as it comes from Microsoft, just has a shipping agent against each customer. But that ignores the fact that you don't necessarily want to use the same shipping agent. And you might have your own transport in some situations. You might want to use different shipping agents for different types of items. Some items, chemicals, if I go back to those again, you have to use a specific shipping agent. So for that, we've added what we call the shipping agent selection matrix. And what happens is when you put an order on, as you put an order on, I've got a fairly simple setup here, but I've got DHL as one of my delivery companies, DPD and FedEx and then I've got my own logistics. Going across the screen, you can see I'm doing everything next day, so nice and simple setup. But I've got different countries. So I use DHL, I use to ship to Germany and France. For the Isle of Man, which is part of the UK, I'm using DPD. And for the Channel Islands, I'm using FedEx. So it will automatically pick up those particular areas. Now, clearly, when it's within the country, how do the delivery areas work? Well, if I drill into this particular delivery area, okay. Actually, let me go and select the delivery areas correctly, and we'll see. So delivery areas, if I go to, let's go to the West Midlands. We deliver to the West Midlands every day. In fact, it's a complete delivery schedule. We've got a regular default vehicle and a area that we do. And then I want, what we can see here, we've got the different postcodes. So it's picking up first the country, then the postcode from the order on the shipment address on the order, and it's then automatically allocating that to a particular route. What it's also doing, to come back to a couple of areas, and I didn't complicate this by creating them, but it can look at volumes, weights, and values. So if it's over a certain volume, you maybe put it on a pallet carrier rather than a normal courier. If it's over a certain value, sometimes you get insured levels as well. Things like hazardous substance, chemicals, you those via the same couriers. You know, DPD want to put that on a special service because they have to treat it in a particular way. Biological substances, you can't ship something that would, in the politest term, go off longer than overnight. So, you know, don't ship some meat in effect on a Friday for delivery on a Monday, because if it's sitting in a depot over the weekend, it will go off. So it takes all of this matrix into account, and what that then does, that's when you're putting on a sales order, let me find one to put up here. Created a few as a sample. Okay. For each line, what it's doing is allocating. So it's automatically worked out that this is London, what shipping agent it should go to, and it's put it on a route number. So that route number is a set of so as soon as that sales order is released, it will then go onto Shipment Routes. Okay, and this is the key thing that the warehouse are using to get all of the orders that are required to go on a particular dispatch, set of dispatches. So maybe a courier, maybe your lorry, one of the lorries of your own transport, which is what I've got set here. So I can see that on this particular day, it's only showing the shipments that are going to go on the 13th of the 4th. That's the sample from the white location. So they don't even have to think about that. What have we got to ship today is the kind of thought process behind that. Whether that's going to the southwest, the east, Wales, northeast, London, East Midlands, etc. What have we got to put on each truck? I could have had FedEx or DHL on here. And in effect, I can see the number of drops, the number of indices that lorry has got to actually stop at. So if I drill down into that, I can see effectively the different posts to go to, and actually the different, I can show the customers as well if I want to do, and flick straight back to the order. And I can see the volume and weight at each customer that we have to go, one a little bit bigger there and somewhere else. What I can actually do if the lorry has gone overweight, because you're reaching its capacity, is I can actually highlight and move the line to a different one. Actually, I can't that one, because that first route, I've done a few tests and I'd actually pushed it into the warehouse before. Let me go back and just look at one of the others. Go down to this one, reserve inventory, the first status. And so if I pick that line and go move line, it then says, what do you want to move it to? A new route, so maybe put on a different truck on for that particular large order, or do I want to move it on to, you know, a courier, or put it on the East Midlands route instead, for instance. And that will allow take that through and reduce the overall weight on that. 13, there we go. So you can see during the day what's building up on each type of dispatch, whether it's, you know, FedEx come at 5 o'clock and we need to know how many orders we've got to package up for FedEx and what weight and volume they're going to collect. When we're done with this, if I just show you one bit on the setup, we can have different processes according to how it's shipping. Okay, so if I go, let me look at the route status setup. So this is where we're defining the number of steps that you go through after that order is released to your logistics people for them to get the stuff out of door. And we've said in this setup, we've set the first one is to reserve the inventory. Basically, make sure we have the stock and reserve it so that we know we're not sending the picker out on a pointless exercise. The next one is to create the warehouse shipments. They're very similar to warehouse receipts, but we have a shipment per shipment to a particular shipping address. We then might create one or more pick. We might have a pick per zone. So we don't necessarily have to have one pick per shipment. We can actually break that down if you have different ones. The example I always use is the customer who ships guttering that goes around the edge of houses. You know, they have big, long 3-meter lengths of guttering, and they have lots of little brackets as well. So they have one person picking the brackets who puts those in a box, and a couple of other people who lift the long lengths of guttering and package those up ready to go. So they produce 2 separate picks for 2 separate groups of people. And Business Central will cope with that quite happily. Couple of things. So while we're reserving the inventory and creating the shipments, we can move the line. Did you remember how it didn't allow me to move the line because I was on the create pick session? So I can define what stages I can move it to a different method of dispatch. I can actually auto process as well. So what does that mean? That means basically that when I do the first one, for instance, if I tick that, when I click reserve inventory, it will then go on to the next stage and automatically create the shipments. So here I'm consigning I'm posting the shipments, and it's automatically consigning them on FedEx if they're on FedEx. So that is then going off via an API to FedEx's system and automatically creating the consignment with FedEx ready for it to go, rather than having to type it into their web page or whatever. And it's automatically printing the documentation to go with the shipment. So chaining these different processes together, we can add new ones in this little processing code unit ID. We've got lots of different options in there. So it just means that the warehouse doesn't have to think or know even what process we do next. Defining that right means that when we come back to this particular station, I can say, right, the next one I want to start working on, in this instance, it's route number 43 to Wales, and I go process, and I go next process. So that goes through, and that's now reserved inventory, and it's created 7 warehouse shipments all of the shipments, all of the orders that are meant to go to Wales tomorrow on this truck are automatically processed. So by doing this, now that changes the status to create picks. So when I go process next, it goes through and it creates the picks and so on. Pretty sure I'll probably have some stock discrepancy on there. So I'll probably get an error saying you've got nothing to handle on some of the pick lines. I didn't. So in effect, what that's done is that's created 27 lines to pick. So the other thing that this does is give you an overview of quite how much work there is to do for this to get done. And if I drill into that, we can see the different source lines. I can see there's one pick, which will probably be one order, a second one, third one, etc. and so on. So I could actually go and look at the card of that individual pick. So that's what they're going around and doing. I can then obviously go pick that up on picking on my device. So to come back then to my device, I've gone into the pick station and it's saying which zone am I picking, which area am I picking? Do I want a specific pick? No. And so it's allocated me the next thing I need to pick. So now I'm in a pick situation and it's telling me to go to a bin W04005 and pick a 1928W, and it's asking me to scan a 1928W. So if I go and do that, I'm aware I'm out of time. It's then saying, right, that's good. What's the bin code? W0405. Let me just find the barcode for that. Okay, quantity to handle. It says I want 86, so I'll enter 86. Also storage lockers. There we go. Okay, and that's picked. I've registered that pick. So if I come back to, actually need to go to pick 3. Actually, it won't be on pick 3 because once it's complete, it actually deletes it from the pick. So we'll see. And if we go back to the warehouse shipment, so probably the easiest line for me to do that on is go with this first one. And we'll see the quantity to ship of that first line only is now 86. So we've said we've picked 80 ships, they're ready to ship. So if I go back to that routing line, one line is picked, it's now number of pick lines has gone down. And so effectively, if I go process now, it will start saying, right, you've got an awful lot outstanding before you can do this particular process. So hopefully you're getting the idea that this is, guys, this is specifically been built so a warehouse, operating overnight can operate this because all they have to do is go process. They can, if they're allowed to, go previous process and undo it a level and redo it. That there's loads of safety checks built in on that. But really, next is kind of the philosophy for taking them through picking and shipping hundreds, if not thousands, of orders in a evening or overnight situation. We built this. We've consistently tuned it to make it simpler because, frankly, we don't want the support calls in the middle of the night saying I can't ship my order. So therefore, it's been designed to be really simple, really straightforward, and take you through. I'm aware I'm now 2 minutes overdue. There is an awful lot more I could show you, particularly if I go back to the device all for pretty much any warehouse device, any warehouse process, any inventory process, and even a few more you can do on this device. If I just show you the complete list of different types of activity we can do on the devices, it's called device functions. That's the list. So even asset checks, if you've got fixed barcodes on your fixed asset, you can go around and check those and log which room they're in and where they are. Assemblies, adding in the first place to your location, you just scan them and it automatically adds them into that location. Lots of inquiries, didn't show you those, but they're very flexible as well. So you can control which ones and does what. If I just go into that pick and we'll edit and see, the information that's displayed on the screen is all defined here. And just the same way as in Standard Business Central, anybody who are on the earlier call, you can make it standard, promoted, or additional, so you can have information that's not clogging up the screen because you've got a small screen, little real estate. You can make it additional so you can expand it out and show it later. And finally, one thing I can't show you because it's almost impossible to demonstrate kind of remotely is that this now is voice enabled. So it's using Microsoft Azure's voice recognition and text-to-speech services, exactly like you maybe use with Siri or one of the other kind of Alexa or one of the other services. And we can enable this transaction for picking. We can have confirmation text. We can say whether you need to confirm for each particular piece of information. So, voice picking, voice transactions in the warehouse, telling them the next bin while they're still picking the last one so that they immediately can start walking towards it is something that we have now and can control very much through the process. So that was something that was added last year. Voice picking used to be a really high cost addition to kind of warehouse management systems. It's now built into the stuff we have on Business Central. Finally, we have obviously a lot of control over who does what. So when you set a user up in the warehouse, you say what role center they come under, and then if I go in, I can then go in and say what functions that particular role has. And for these devices, specialist devices that have function keys, I can define what function is on what key, so that if you want to jump out of one transaction and go across to another, you can do that. You can do a bin inquiry maybe on F1 and an item inquiry on function key 2. So if you need to look something up while you're part of one transaction, you can do that and then pop back to that original transaction. So you can see lots of flexibility, lots of color control, how big things are. The screens are deliberately designed with the handheld to be large. Fat fingers in warehouses, with gloves on. That's why they're particularly designed to be large and easy to navigate around. So if I just do one file inquiry. Okay, so 1924, we've got it in several different locations. This is how the additional information works. As you click the button, it expands out, so you can see it scrolls down, so we can see extra pieces of information that it's a fixed default bin. That's completely definable within the screen. No code changes needed to scan what you need to see. So I'm almost 10 minutes over. At that point, I'm probably going to wrap up because I think I've hopefully given you a reasonable flavour of kind of online warehouse automation, making it very quick to create the transactions that they need to do, and also then very quick to actually feedback what they've done. No bits of paper that have to come into an office and be updated onto a screen. It's all real time with a your atypical barcoding system. Should have said we can use any barcodes from 1D and 2D, so things like data matrix barcodes are fine, where we actually do a single scan and we can capture multiple pieces of information, item number, lot number, expiry date, can all be captured in one go. GS1 compliance as well that we have. That again makes it very, very quick and accurate. Probably I haven't used yet, and that's probably an oversight to get everything real time. Real time means that we can do a stock check whenever we want to, and in fact we can do it as part of a transaction. So one of my favorites is as part of a pick, we can say how many are left. So not just how many are you picking, but how many are left in the bin. And we can do that conditionally. So if it gets down below the minimum, we actually ask how many are left. Perfect time to do a stock check because there's not many to count and you're at the bin anyway, so it's as efficient as you like. And because we're real time, there's no danger of something's moved and not being counted. So we get our discrepancy there and can either put it right straight away or it can put it on a list of somebody to investigate. 9 minutes overdue, according to the clock, 16:09. So at that point, I'll probably open it up to questions and ask if there's anything anybody wants. I haven't been watching the chat.
Liam. Yeah, there is a question in the chat. Is it possible to pick every sales order or delivery location separately, which are on the same delivery route?
Yeah, so if yes, absolutely. So how you pick them can be controlled, as I said. So you can have multiple picks, or you can have a consolidated pick for the whole route if you want to. So if you don't care what order it goes on the truck, then effectively you can just create one pick for everything that's got to go on that dispatch. You load the van, and then almost the person getting the far end picks it when they get there out of the van, which could be an efficient way of doing. We have other ones where you have to pick it and you have to load it. So what I didn't show you as part of shipment management is you can say which customer, if you have a round, what's often called a round robin route, where they typically go around the same customers in the same order every time, you can define that in as the different delivery addresses, and then it will issue the picks in reverse drop order, so that in effect you're loading the truck with the last drop first, so that in effect it makes it very easy to lift, particularly if you've got large heavy items. You don't want to have to lift them off to get the first ones off. So we have a lot of sequence control, we call it, to enable us to define. So is it possible to pick every sales order or delivery location separately, which are on the same delivery route? Yes, absolutely. And that's probably the default way of doing it, Mirko, to be honest, because in effect they want to package up that order, put it for dispatch, and then start on the next one. Okay.
James, if there's anything else you do want to show us, we haven't got anything else. If people want to stay on, and I know if you've got some more you want to show, I'm sure that's absolutely fine. If people need to leave, then so be it. But you're not overrunning or overstaying your welcome in terms of what we've got planned. So more than happy if you want to show anything. I know one of the things that you've shown.
I'll probably run through. So if there's any questions, anything people particularly would like to see, I know I've run through it extremely fast. I could spend a day showing this stuff quite happily, because it has that level of sophistication, I guess is the word I would use. But where do I start? Which picks do I pick out now? I think it moves on every time. So some of the capability that that's being constantly added to this, it's getting better and better. In terms of the voice is one thing I've talked about. Some of the automation now, so that in fact replens are generated automatically. So as soon as a pick is made that takes it below the minimum, it will automatically generate a replen for that bin. is something that we have on pilot with some customers at the moment, so that in effect you're trying to keep your replans going through, because that's critical to get your pick rate, successful pick rate up. One of the things I didn't show is if I hadn't picked 86 on the quantity, so if I've only been able to pick, I don't know, 40, because that's all that were in the pick bin, it asks me a reason why I'm not picking the balance. And if that reason is awaiting replan, i.e., there's not enough here, but there's some coming, then effectively it will get me to do the rest of the pick, and then it will come back to that bin in the hope that the replan's been done at that point, so that in effect I can add that. If I say, I'm not picking them because they were damaged and we don't have any elsewhere in the warehouse, then effectively that would short that order and send it anyway. Shipment management, you have orders which you have to dispatch complete. So we have customers where if they don't have all of it, if they don't get all of it, they don't want any of it. A bathroom distributor is a classic. You don't want the toilet if you can't have the bath, and vice versa, because in effect you've got to fit the whole order together and you're not starting until you can finish. So in effect there we're making sure that actually we don't generate picks for any of the lines until we can pick all of the lines, but we are reserving that inventory so that toilet doesn't go to somewhere else while we're waiting for the bath, if that makes sense. So lots of different capability. Usually there's some consulting to actually talk to organizations. Usually it's a precursor to change. So usually we're trying to drive some efficiency when we put this in. So not necessarily following the process that they do now, because actually this technology, if you like, gives opportunity to be more efficient, to improve, and certainly to update, up the picks, and that's only going to get felt, more and more faster. So again, if I talk about some of the stuff that's coming in this, it's about trying to have the people so that they travel the minimum distance with nothing. What do I mean by that? Well, maybe you're doing a put away and you go from, my example was goods in to D4. What needs to happen close to D4 to go somewhere else? So you're looking for what outstanding transaction is there at D5 that needs to go to F7, and then you go from F7 to goods out, and then maybe goods in is close to goods out. So your fork truck, if he's carrying pallets around, effectively is traveling the minimum distance with empty forks, and therefore instead of going the typical backhaul situation where they're going empty, you're not doing that. Now that is impossible to do with paper, but the technology where you've got people online and in effect it's checking second by second what they need to do next, we can really prioritize and drive that process, and I think that's only going to get cleverer.
James, there's a couple more questions.
Yep.
So physical document that can be printed out and handed to the drivers, which shows delivery addresses, weights, etc.
Yeah, manifest. So I didn't show it, but one of the things that you can print, when I said print documentation on that final process, we can print the delivery notes, and again, I didn't mention it, but you can on that route you can factor in collections as well. So they can be sales returns. If we're delivering to that location and there's a return, clearly we'll want to pick that return up at the same time. So it will factor that in and print the return note interleaved with the delivery notes. So effectively the driver picks up a wad of paperwork off the printer, and that is all his paperwork, her paperwork, in the correct order. And then typically the last thing we print is what's called a driver's manifest, which is a list of everywhere they've got to go. So he's got the manifest on the top, and underneath he's got all the delivery notes, stroke collection notes in the right order. That's if we don't integrate with a proof of delivery system. A lot of the time now we're working with, there's a system out there called Podfather, which allows electronic proof of deliveries. And so we might be sending a manifest to that. We might be collecting and bringing back to the shipments the signatures, etc., for actual delivery and collecting photographs and that kind of thing. Another photographs reminds me, didn't mention it on receipt, but you can if you have a device which has a camera, you can actually trigger the photographs. So you saw me entering some of that QC information on receipt. If QC question 1, I say rate the vehicle, rate the quality of the packaging on a ratio of 1 to 5, where 1 is great but 4 and 5 are pretty damaged. Then I can say, right, okay, as part of this, when it's a 4 or a 5, I've got to take a picture of the receipt. So I've got evidence that it's arrived in a damaged state when we took it off the truck. Okay, and we capture that, store that against the transaction. Then when the supplier says, well, you must have damaged it after you got it, you go, well, I've got a picture of it on the truck damaged before we took it off. How much evidence do you want that it's not our problem? Again, sales returns, stuff comes in, sales returns, we take a photograph of it. So we've got evidence of what's been returned, so that if we get into a discussion with the customer about whether it's a full credit or a partial credit, etc., we've got as much evidence as possible that takes up. We've got one customer now who actually wants to take a photograph of what they put in the box to send the customer, because they've had disputes with the customer saying, okay, I've got 4 items, but the 5th one's not there. Okay, we'll take a photograph of the contents of the box, so that in effect, every time we ship to you, we're doing that. Maybe that's just per customer, so that we only do it for the customers where we have a track record of them having missing items. So we trying to use the technology to drive process to counter out problems. Yeah.
James, we've got a few more questions popping through. Can you pick orders based on a customer priority, i.e. could customer priority 1 before picked before customer priority 10? Absolutely,
and the classic one of that is collections. So when you have a customer who rings up and places an order for collection, and you want that, typically they're doing that, they want to come and collect it same day. So the next pick, you saw a pick, I said no to the specific pick question. So it comes up with a next pick by order of priority, and typically we're making the collection the next picks that started and delivered to a specific bin at goods out, so it's there ready for the customer to collect. But you can drive it on a different priority number. How that priority is driven from your sales order is a different question.
James, another one around, I think it's probably more a BI type of question, but is there a way of implementing displaying a heat map to drive warehouse organisation? Where are the most frequently visited bins?
Yes, we've done it. It's Power BI. So by linking up Power BI to this, if I go, we have something called warehouse entries. Warehouse entries. There we go. So warehouse entry is every movement of a item of stock that's happened in your warehouse. So there will be millions of these probably, and we have customers who've gone into literally millions, and I'm going down. So in effect, that pick that I did of the 1928W, W04, W05, 86, I can track that back. I can track who did it, when they did it, the time they did it, from what bin to what bin. So doing an analysis of the bin code, W04, 005, I could filter this to see, how many transactions have gone through that particular bin. So actually, just two. So I've got a movement in of 5,000 and a movement out of 86 on a particular date at a time. So analysis of that warehouse entry table, however you want to slice and dice it, will give you analysis of what's gone on, and a count of the movements gives you for a particular bin, gives you your heat map of the bins.
We've actually done another video that's on the YouTube channel. I'll try and get a link for it before the call ends, where we did an overview design on the of what the warehouse looked like from a top-down view, and then we overlaid that data so you could see where the busiest bins and pick faces were, and so we could maybe rearrange the warehouse to be the most efficient, and fast-moving stock was brought closer to the shipping area. But I'll try and dig that out before we go. There's another couple, James. If one order needs picking in the blue warehouse and the other part of the order picking in a white warehouse, can they be split and be picked by warehouse?
Yeah. So the shipment routing is per warehouse. So I select who's looking at the dispatches for the white warehouse. So you've got a choice. Do you transfer? How do you get it onto the truck to go? Does the truck call at both warehouses and pick up both, or do they actually transfer it? Do you have a local transport that effectively brings it from blue to white to be loaded on the truck and dispatched from white? So there's some decisions to be made there, but you can control as many locations as you want to. And in fact, where people have depots located around the country, for instance, it can automatically pop into the right depot for that customer. So by postcode, we can say, right, we need to dispatch from Bristol if it's, Torquay postcode, because that's the closest, and therefore automatically set the order to be dispatched from Bristol, regardless of where sales are. And with e-commerce, if you watch the e-commerce transaction, the part of this is the customer doesn't know how you want to do. Where we used to have a sales order processor who put the order on, they could decide how it would be going and where it would be going from. Now with e-commerce, nobody's doing that, right? And we don't want somebody to have to go in and allocate it. So we just want the rules to be able to say, okay, this is what we're sending, where we've got to send it to. It should go from here via this method.